In this episode of the Writer's Corner live show, we sit down with the award-winning author Alexander Boldizar, whose latest book, The Man Who Saw Seconds, is a breathtaking thriller about a man who can see 5 seconds into the future. So we'll take a dive into the implications of such a gift, the moral dilemmas it presents, and how Alexander's extraordinary life from being a Harvard lawyer to a paleontologist in the Sahara shapes his storytelling. Tune in for a very great conversation about time, humanity, and the fine line between choice and fate. Don't go away. We'll be right back with the Writer's Corner live show.
Imagine a world where the lines of reality blur with the fantastical. Embark on journeys from humble beginnings to the pinnacles of literary greatness. On the Writer's Corner, we delve into the lives of unique wordsmiths, known for their compelling storytelling. They are artisans who craft fantastical realms, etched in our memory long after the final page is turned. Every tale begins with a single word, a single idea. Authors create sensations that keep you on the edge of your seat. Witness how they transform setbacks into stepping stones. Use refusals to spark growth and turn rejections into catalysts for new inspiration. Witness the diversity in writing as it gives birth to a vast array of genres, from drama to mystery to children's stories, fantasy, and reality. Join us as we uncover sources of inspiration and the magic that defines the author's craft. Find out how authors breathe life into their characters and meticulously craft narratives and plots that captivate readers. Get a sneak peek into upcoming works and join us as we celebrate literary greatness only on the Writer's Corner. We don't just celebrate best-selling Amazon and New York Times authors, but also indie authors. Join us on the journey from the birth of a tale to the creation of a masterpiece, only on the Writer's Corner live show. Stay tuned.
Now, if you've just joined us, then a hearty big welcome to the Writer's Corner live show. And if you're not yet following us on our social media channels, please do so, because that way you'll get notified the next time we go live. Now, if you haven't met me yet, I'm Bridgetti Lim Banda from Cape Town in South Africa. And in today's show, we talk to Alexander Boldizar. Our live stream is brought to you compliments of Creative Edge, StreamYard, and BeLive Media. But before we introduce our amazing guest, Alexander Boldizar, I first want to say hello to my friend and co-host, Mary Elizabeth Jackson. Mary is a multiple #1 Amazon best-selling author and a certified special needs and disabilities advocate. And she's dedicated her entire life to empowering underrepresented voices through her writing and advocacy. She's also a speaker, educator, ghostwriter, and songwriter. Mary, how are you today, my friend? And I'm so sorry, you guys have been dealing with storms and all kinds of stuff in your neck of the woods. So sending love and strength to everyone out there. How are you?
Yeah, we're doing well. We're good where we are. We actually have some family with us who came over from Asheville because it's really bad over there. It's really, it's, I think, apocalyptic for some people. I know it sounds kind of drama, but it really is turning into that with the desperation of water and need for food. And, gas is very scarce, and the roads are so bad and everything. So it really is a very surreal situation for, I think, 6 states. It's gone. There's destruction and stuff. So, we count our blessings every day, and we pray for those out there who are struggling, that they get what they need and that everything's going to be okay. But, I've had people reach out to me, they've lost their homes and they have picked up and literally moved to somewhere else because they really had no choice. And that's really hard to hear and sad. And we don't want that for anyone. So, thank you for acknowledging that today. And we're so excited about our author today. He is one of the most unique people I think will ever know, right?
Absolutely. So guys, if you have not yet met this amazing man, his name is Alexander Boldizar, and he is an award-winning author, a lawyer, and a world traveler. Now, noteworthy is he was the very, very first post-independence Slovak citizen to graduate from Harvard Law School. And his career has spanned continents and roles from art gallery director in Bali to a porter in the high Arctic, and even a Times Square billboard writer. Oh my goodness, yes, this man is extraordinary, and his work has won multiple accolades. His debut novel, The Ugly, was a bestseller among small presses in the United States. But you know what? Let's just get him to come and join us, and he can tell. No one else can share his story better than him. So let's give him a warm welcome, shall we?
Yes. Hi, Alexander.
Welcome.
Hi, Bridget and Mary. Thank you so much for having me on. And thank you,
it.
especially Mary, for making time despite all the crazy weather you're having.
Listen, I
really
came
appreciate
in. I came in with skid marks today to get here, so I didn't even go live anywhere else today. I was like, I'm not missing this. So I'm so glad to be here with you. And we're going to jump right in because we want to share you with our audiences. Okay, you've lived an extraordinary life, which Bridgetti has just been talking about. And, you know, traveling between all those different jobs and lifestyles and everything, you know, in worlds from Wall Street to the Sahara. How has that shaped the characters in your novels?
That's an interesting question. Individual characters were shaped by different periods or events in my life, but I think the combination of living in so many different countries and working in different fields and thinking in different languages when I lived in different countries, I think it made me very it's one of the reasons that in The Man Who Saw Seconds, I try to avoid giving conclusions. I try to avoid telling the reader what to think. I try to keep it very open because I think living through a lot of different experiences and cultures, you end up with this idea that there really are different ways of seeing the world, different that nobody's a bad guy in their own mind. So even the antagonist characters in my book, I try to make as true to their own ethical and moral frameworks as would be if in a real life person. And so I'm kind of jumping into very quickly into the story, but you know, as Preble is going through his you know, he's trying to protect the son, different readers will track with the main character for a different length of time. And I try very hard not to give the reader an answer an authorial answer. I try not to tell readers what to think. I try to frame questions in different ways and present conflicting ideas and conflicting worldviews without ever really making the conclusion for the reader. And that's something I've tried to do in all my writing is not to ever, personally, I'm allergic to books that tell me what to think, even if I agree with what they're telling me. And I think that comes out of having lived in so many different cultures, that an appreciation of true viewpoint diversity in the sense of that there really are different ways of doing things. And I'm not saying people shouldn't have a moral, I have my own personal views, but I don't ever want to impose them on other people. And I want to create writing that is open for the reader to enter with their own values and figure out how they view the characters themselves, if that makes any sense. I think if you read the book, it makes sense. If you haven't read the book, that might not make as much sense.
I think that's a great skill to have for an author, not to inject or project his personal feelings or outcome, you know, into the book and not allowing the reader to think for themselves. Now, The Man Who Saw Seconds explores the consequences of a split-second decision. How do you think we, in general, underestimate the weight of our everyday choices?
Well, I think it's interesting how in complex systems you can never predict. You know, we're all familiar with the butterfly effect, where one tiny decision can have massive consequences, but the inverse is also true. Sometimes a massive amount of effort will yield no consequences, and so I play with that idea a little bit. It's very much on the back burner, but everything gets triggered by a very small incident. Now, part of that was I want to have this idea of constant escalation, starting with the smallest possible moment. And that's part of the reason that Prebble, people ask me, what's a strange name. I wanted to play with the idea of pebble. Like, it has several things in it. It's for precognition. It's rebel because he ends up kind of becoming a rebel against society. But it's also the idea of a pebble. So that Muhammad Ali has this quote saying that it's not the size of the mountain that's the problem, it's the pebble in your shoe. And so when Prebble is fighting against the entire might of eventually, the entire United States and the world, it all starts off with the smallest possible incident. And I want to show how kind of the institutional structures can act like a steamroller where they just can't stop. And so even if something irritates them as small as a pebble, it can grow into role-changing proportions. But then even at one point when the president of the United States tries to stop things, even he can't do it. So you have this strange dichotomy in complex systems where a tiny thing can impact everything, and then even a very large amount of effort can have no consequence. And I've always found complex systems to be really interesting because they're so chaotic, and I just find complexity interesting.
Yes, and it keeps people on their toes, doesn't it? And I like the creative thing that you've done with Prebble's name. I love that because I think it deepens the experience that a reader has, and the reader can enjoy more when there's more to it than just what kind of meets the eye. So Prebble Jefferson's gift gives him a form of control. What do you think drives humanity's obsessions with controlling time and destiny? And isn't everyone obsessed with that?
Yeah, I mean, we're all living in time. We're all walking towards our death, not to be morbid about it. And so time becomes something that it's a very fascinating concept because all the laws of physics work just as well if you assume time flows backwards, or if there's a lot of physical theories that believe time is not real in an objective kind of within the laws of physics. Is just the way our brains order reality. That gets a little too complicated to wrap my brain around, but there's this really fascinating thing that we're all living in time. We're all bounded by it. We all kind of have events in our lives that we wish we could rewind, and there's no rewind button. And it also gives structure to our lives, like the idea that we live in a cycle where we're living towards a point we don't know what happens after. Like time is I think the experience of time, even though we don't think about it on a daily basis, is so essential to what we are. And the idea of prediction is I think inherent in all intelligence. Like every intelligent system is predicting the future. Even a bacterium predicts that when there's more a nutrient gradient, higher levels of nutrition in a certain direction, it's predicting that if it continues in that direction, there'll be more nutrition. So everything from the simplest intelligence of a bacterium to humans, we're constantly trying to predict the future, even though if we're not realizing. And we, as humans, by far, we're able to have the most complex understanding of prediction. And so our entire survival, all of intelligence, is based on it. So again, I found these really fascinating ideas to play with. I don't want to give the reader the wrong view. All these things are built under this story. I mean, the book is a thriller, but I do enjoy playing with ideas, and all those ideas were kind of embedded underneath the story.
Very, very interesting. Now, your book delves into the unique balance between individual freedom and societal control. How much of this do you see reflected in the real world?
Well, I do think that there's an Austrian philosopher, Ivan Illich, who had this idea that institutions, when they get beyond a certain size, start to work against the purpose for which they were created. And I think in our world, all our institutions are so big that they start working against their purpose. Examples would be ministries of defense that start wars, or schools that make children stupid, or hospitals that end up killing. The third leading cause of death is from hospital mistakes, or even something like a car will create the remoteness that it's created to overcome. And so I really want to play this with this idea that institutions end up working against the purpose for which they're created. And I want to juxtapose it against, a sole individual, but in order to give him a fighting chance, I had to give him a superpower. But I try to keep that superpower as slim as possible to make it, if somebody can see a day into the future, they're unstoppable. It's like writing Superman with no kryptonite. So then you would have to, as an author, you'd have to kind of, every other precognition book I've read limits the main character to glimpses in order to create some kind of limitations on the main character. But once you start doing that, then you as the author have to you're essentially stepping in to select which glimpses are convenient for the plot. And that feels a little bit like cheating if your purpose is to let these ideas play out. So by giving Preble a consistent 5-second window, which is actually narrowed when he's emotional and when he needs it the most, by keeping that consistent attribute, it gave him enough of a chance to push back against all of this institutional might of the three-letter agencies and keep it consistent without having to, conveniently select, the Deus ex machina aspect of writing. But then I also want to play with this idea of, can an individual, if they get enough power, start to act like an institution? There's a threshold that he crosses where he starts almost to act like an institution, and the stuff he's doing becomes counterproductive. So I was playing with, because I want to keep escalating and escalating through the book with no off ramp. I wanted to see, well, at some point, does even something as good, inherently good, as a father's love for his son and wife and trying to protect them, can even that start to be counterproductive? And again, this is where this idea, as he has to take more and more extreme actions to save his family, he does worse and worse things. And I wanted to leave it up to the reader to decide how far to track with Preble. And it's been really fascinating. One of the most fun things has been seeing how different readers track for a different length of time. Some people will go with him all the way to the end. Some people hit a point like, whoa, this is too far. And it's been, I don't like to say what my point is, because that has too much authorial weight. So I like leaving that up to the reader. And I really enjoyed seeing the dispersion in opinions, like how wide that range is where people track.
And anyone that's watching us right now, Alexander has taken, I think you've gone to great length to really put a lot into what you're writing, and very detailed your thought about your characters and the plot and the twist and there's just so many minute details that I hear you speaking about. And I don't think that always happens in a book. And it doesn't happen with every author, because not every author thinks the same way. So I think this is very, very important, and setting your book apart, that's definitely a must read. Absolutely. And you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but so Preble's ability is 5 seconds in the future. Like, what would any of us do with that if we had it? And, how would you handle, and you've kind of touched on this, but if you can expand a little bit more, the ethical implications of using it, even for yourself?
Yeah, well, that is another underlying theme in the book where I'm from Eastern Europe by birth. I was born in what's now Slovakia, and we have a much more relationship and family-based morality, whereas in Canada, United States, and Western countries, there's an acronym WEIRD: Western, Educated, Industrialized, Rich, and Democratic. It spells out the word weird. The weird, the Western countries tend to have a very universal morality. Actions are either right or wrong, regardless of basically your personal relationships. And that's not shared throughout the world. In Eastern Europe or in many parts of Africa and Asia, the family relationship comes first. And so I did kind of play with this division where Preble's definitely taking this, he's putting his family ahead of the world. And the rest of society is is taking the universal view to too far an extent, almost to like, because he can't be brought into the system. He's like this irritant that they can't stop attacking. It's like an immune system that's gone haywire because it it just can't kill the virus, so it keeps increasing. We saw this, we see this all the time. I mean, during COVID, it was mostly the immune system that actually killed the people. It was a cytokine storm. And so I made society react almost like an immune system that just couldn't get rid of this virus. And so it was that juxtaposition of moralities was another one of these tensions that I want to play with without offering an answer. But you definitely picked up an important theme in the book.
Very, very interesting. Now, when we introduced into the show, we talked about how well-rounded you are in your experiences. And I mean, keen to see how that influences you as your style of writing. Now, you've got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Is that different from other Jiu-Jitsus?
It's different from Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was originally brought in by Japanese Mitsuo Maeda, but the Brazilians had something called Vale Tudo. It was like early MMA, but no rules at all. Vale Tudo means everything goes. And so it was adapted to be very applicable in a real fight. So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is basically, it's fighting without striking. So you're trying to break each other's arms or tear each other's ligaments or choke each other out, but without striking, so you're not getting concussions.
Very interesting.
And actually, that did end up playing into the book, because a lot of I actually teach it now as well, and a lot of my sparring partners and students are police officers, members of the SWAT team. I mean, I had a sergeant from the SWAT team here give me feedback on the book to make the SWAT side more realistic. I have 2 training partners who were on the Secret Service staff of one of the 4 Israeli prime ministers and one here in Canada. And so I had a little bit, even though Preble's fighting against the police, I have enough police and Secret Service connections that I could understand their mindset, and again, make those characters not cardboard cutouts, but make them kind of legitimate within their own moral frameworks. And I definitely, at no point, even though Preble ends up fighting the police because he's fighting in society, I want to be careful not to make the book anti-police. It's skeptical of institutions. It's skeptical of maybe the 3-letter agency, but it's not like I try to make a strong differentiation between police officers as people and then the system as a system. So that was important to me, and that access to those people, a lot of it comes from my friendships through people that I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with.
Alexander, can I just say that you are brilliant, because you answered my question without me asking you the question.
What was the question? It's like seeing the future. The question comes after the answer, right?
Yes. The question was, how does your martial arts experience influence the way you approach conflict in your writing? And you answered it.
That's awesome. Well, he has a little bit of his character that runs through him. And, I love that you brought up the differences between Western and the United States, and then the rest of the world. And I think it's a great dishonor and disservice that families aren't put more first. I think that's a real struggle that we have. And I think there's a lot of us out there. I know I'm one who is out there teaching that from a passionate place of how important it is for the family to be the center and to teach our children to do that. We need to heal that, Okay, we'll get off that platform. We're going to go back to what we're talking to Alexander about, because we can all get on those platforms, right, about this stuff. What was the most challenging aspect of writing a story? Oh my gosh, and I'm sure there were several. Where time, a universal constant, becomes fluid, and it may be really easy for some people, but I don't know that it's easy for everyone to write those things.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question? When the universal constant becomes?
Yeah. What is the most challenging aspect of writing a story where time, a universal constant, is becomes fluid?
That actually ties really well into the earlier questions, where I think the most beautiful thing about fiction is the ability to see a character from the inside. There's no other medium that does this, and I think it's underappreciated in our school systems. when you're watching a movie, you're seeing the person from the outside. You're not seeing their internal framework of how they're processing information, not just on a level of morality, but different people think differently. They actually process information differently. Different cultures do it. But I can't imagine a bigger gap than actually seeing time differently. So having a character that for whom the present isn't infinitely narrow, but is smeared out, trying to visualize what reality and what thought processing would be like for him was really, really fun, but also challenging because it's a completely different language of experience of how you're interacting, and being able to kind of, because it's not just that he sees into the future. He can almost, it's like his present is smeared into a 5-second window, so he can almost go from cause to effect. From effect to cause. So I do actually, the answering the question before it was asked, I had one point in the book where Preble answers the question before it's asked, and my editor said, "Oh, you made a mistake." Because he hasn't been asked that yet. I said, "Yeah, I know. He can see the question before it's coming." And so I try to work that into the story, kind of little moments like that, but it confused the readers. I did keep that one, but it was really interesting trying to visualize what the role would look like. And then there's a moment where he loses because he's so, with the bear scene, he gets so emotional that he loses his window. And so it's fun imagining what our reality would look like to somebody who's been able to see into the future. And so everything felt very jagged. So him, normally with the present being smeared out, when he lost his ability for a short while to see any of the future, the way we see reality felt very jagged and sharp, and like things were unexpected, which was very alien to him. And those games of trying to see reality from a completely different perspective, that was a lot of fun to, from the thinking side. This is why books take me 8 years to write and not one.
Very interesting. Can totally understand it. Talking about the book, can you please hold up the cover and tell us a little bit about the cover? How much input did you have into designing that cover and the color? What's the significance?
The cover was designed by Joel Amat Gould, he was commissioned by the publisher Clash Books. So I had actually very little input other than the original version of the man made him look like a James Bond agent, and I didn't want him looking like James Bond. I want him to look more like every man and a regular person. So there was some back and forth on the cover, but the all the creative credit goes to Joel, not to me.
I love it.
What made you settle on the final drawing? What sealed it?
I like the movement. I like the time. I like the simplicity. It's clean. It's not. It just kind of gets. It's very clean. It gets to the essence. It has this sense of the clock and of movement, and that's all I wanted the cover to do. I didn't want anything too busy or complicated.
Yeah, I love that. And I tell you something that's interesting. You say it takes you 8 years. I had somebody message me the other day asking me about self-publishing and what I thought about people who put a book out a month. Like she felt like she needed to be. And I was like, wow, I'm not really sure how people do that very effectively.
Guys, you're out of time, unfortunately. Yes. It's 30 minutes go by so quickly. Alexander, we'll have to have you back because I think we actually need an hour show with you. So thank you so much. Thank you to our amazing audience who's joined us today on the Writers' Corner live show. It's been an absolute pleasure diving into The Man Who Saw Seconds with Alexander Boldizar. And so if today's conversation sparked your curiosity, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss any future interviews with our inspiring authors like Alexander. So until next time, keep reading, stay curious, and remember, every decision shapes the story of your life.
That's right. And go to the carousel and get the book.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Go grab a copy. Thank you for joining us on the Writers' Corner live show. 30 minutes of insightful author conversations with some of the biggest names in the industry including award-winning authors and international indie sensations. Join us on the next episode of the Writer's Corner live show.